What's up YouTube, Oliver here. Today we're going to be having a look at Tweetbot. Now Tweetbot is a Twitter client for the Mac. It's made by a developer called Tweetbot. It has a fantastic UI and lots of brilliant features. So we're going to be looking at version 3, which it has some new UI changes over the previous versions, if you weren't already aware of that, which did come out a little while ago, and it does have some fantastic features. Now Twitter have recently been making some changes to the way that third-party apps can use their APIs. It's to do with things like the fact that there's a lot of huge enterprises that now use Twitter to manage their customer service. A lot of people, you can just tweet companies for help, and as a result of that, there's a lot of high-end developers are making these very high budget apps that they charge companies hundreds of pounds a month for, so that they can manage, all their social media presence. And obviously Twitter are saying that their APIs, they're now going to charge a lot more money. So unfortunately it does start to alienate some of the smaller developers like Tweetbot, purely because they're now, it's going to cost them thousands of pounds to have access to the same sort of functionality. However, although we don't quite know yet exactly what Twitter's plans are, because they have been changing things around a little bit, and they were asked to postpone some of the changes, which they did agree to do. At some point in the near future, though, some of the new API changes will probably be implemented. And developers like Tweetbot are going to have to make changes to that. However, it shouldn't affect the functionality too much. The great thing about Tweetbot is that there isn't no longer a Mac app for Twitter. Twitter used to have their own app in the Mac App Store, which they discontinued a few months ago now. So this is a really good app, has some really nice UI elements and some brilliant features if you like to manage your Twitter feed. Okay, well, let's jump in and have a look. Okay, so this is the window that you're presented with basically when you first open Tweetbot. And it's a very nice clean UI. It's very customizable. You can basically have as many columns as you want. You can click on the drop downs to choose what you want in these columns. The first column is usually fixed to just be timeline. You can move things around. The other columns that you create, basically you can have as many different things in your columns. You can have your timelines, and they're just a couple of lists I've created. Different notifications, you've got your direct messages, your search. You can save particular searches, and you can also have things from your own accounts, for example your profile, your tweets, likes, lists, that kind of thing. So I've got the timeline, and then I've got mentions, and then I've just randomly done a search here for hashtag iOS. You could have anything you want. For example, you might want to put certain phrase in there. For example, if you owned a company and you're using Twitter to manage your social media for customer support, that column could be your name of your company. So if it was Apple, for example, they could have a search for iOS. If it was Apple's support team, then they could look for anyone that happens to maybe hasn't mentioned the Apple support Twitter handle directly, but is tweeting something about iOS, and if they can see anyone tweeting something saying iOS isn't working, then they can reply straight away without necessarily having to have been mentioned in the tweet. So it is quite handy. So you can have, basically, you just click in the bottom right hand corner of the outermost column, you'll get this little icon. You can just drag this out and create as many columns as you want, and do the same to remove the columns. It also looks really good in full screen mode. Again, you can just drag to make columns, and you can also adjust the width of the columns. You can just kind of click and drag to adjust the width of the columns like that. So you can actually have a really nice view. I'll just go back to the windowed view, how I tend to use it the most. Now down the side here, you've also got things like your timeline, your notifications, direct messages, search and accounts. Again, so you can just easily click on things down the side here and access them. However, you can also drag this right the way in, so you just have the icons. In the earlier versions of Tweetbot, this is the only view that you could have, and since version 3, this is one of the new UI changes. You can actually have an expanded view of your sidebar, which is how I tend to use it. And then if you go up to Tweetbot preferences, you've got even more options. You can have a light theme or a dark theme. I tend to use the light theme, but the dark theme does look awesome, especially if you're using dark mode on Mojave. You can do, adjust things like sounds, font size. You can choose whether you want the username or the full name or both for the display name. You can choose things like your date format, how large or small you want your image thumbnails to be, or none at all if you don't want any thumbnails. I've got my action buttons to show a mouse over, which means if I put my mouse on a tweet, you get these, meaning you have a very nice kind of timeline view here, as opposed to it being, cluttered with the action buttons under each tweet. And then you can basically just, adjust things. You can have round or square avatars. I prefer them round. Badges is the verified ticks and that sort of thing. Then you can also add your accounts there and choose services you want to use for things like your image and video uploads and your URL shortening. So really customizable UI. It looks fantastic, really nice tool to use, much easier than using the desktop. If you go onto the website, which is the only official way to access Twitter, is to go to a web browser now and access it that way, because they've got rid of their own desktop app. But I think it's very clunky going into a web browser. In my opinion, I much prefer to use something like Tweetbot. It's just much nicer, much more streamlined. With regards to creating tweets, you can click on this icon down here, and you basically have various options. You can have drafts. You've got topics, which means anything that you tweet about, if you have that topic and up there, it means it creates a thread of tweets. So if you want to tweet about one particular event, for example, you're going to do some live tweets from the WWDC keynote, for example, what you could do is put them all in the same topic, and it'll appear as one big thread. You can do all sorts of things like that. Really handy. Obviously you can add your location, you can add emoji, you can also add pictures. We'll come out with that. So some of the other great features that you've got here, you've got powerful timeline filters. So you can show basically how I've got here Apple or text. So I basically set up a timeline list, so Apple shows tweets from certain users. For example, you can see I've got lists here, and then you can also go to show timeline filters. And what you can do is you can have filters here, which is Apple News or whatever you want, and you can have include the word Apple. You can also have exclude, which means don't show tweets that include a certain phrase. So for example, you might not want to know spoilers about a football game or something. You could say exclude anything to do with that, and then it means you can filter your Twitter timeline to hide certain things out. You can have rules. You can include things like people that are verified, people that you follow. You can create as many of these as you want. Really handy though, you can include and exclude certain keywords. And all you literally do when you open up the timeline views, if you click on that, it basically applies it to your timeline. A couple of other things to point out. It does sync over iCloud, which means that basically what you can do is it'll sync to an iOS device, because they do have an iOS app. It doesn't sync between Macs, because I've tested it between my iMac and MacBook, but it will sync between, for example, an iMac and an iPad. And it'll sync things just like the position in the timeline that you were in and that sort of thing. So quite handy. It can manage multiple Twitter accounts. You've got a lot of options to have notifications that will come in a notification center and so on. You can add notes to someone's profile. So for example, if I go to the iMorg account here, if I right click, I can go to add note, and you can just put, and they're stored privately, no one can see them. And then it puts a note, so you can put anything you want there. Really handy. So you might want to say, this is why I followed this, because this person, reviews tech or something like that. You could put in there, or for example, if you're using it from a business point of view, you could put notes about a customer, saying a customer's support status. You could say this is currently being looked into. Just an easy way of being able to have like private notes on there. So really nice tool. So you can either do that by right clicking, or if you come to the profile and click on the little picture of the person up there, you can open them. You can mute. So for example, as well, you might want to mute a certain profile for 24 hours. If, for example, like I say, with regards to spoilers, say you didn't want to know what was going on in the upcoming Apple keynote, you can just mute them that way. You can enable notifications for certain accounts and so on. It's a really nice way to manage your Twitter feeds there. It's got loads of features. I believe it's currently around $9.99 on the Mac App Store, but I do highly recommend it. Really, really useful for doing more advanced management of Twitter. As I mentioned at the beginning of the video, there are potentially going to be some changes Chatbots are working on getting access to the new APIs, but obviously it's not guaranteed at the moment. However, it will still work. It just might have some slightly more limited or delayed functionality, but the main things will still work regardless. It's going to be around about the beginning of August when the new APIs do come into play, but hopefully it doesn't affect it too much, because it is my favourite app for viewing Twitter. Okay, well, thanks for watching. If you have any questions, please do leave a comment. If you like the video, please thumbs up. For more videos like this coming on very soon, please subscribe to the channel. Thanks for watching. Bye for now.